Light. Light is the heartbeat of our images. It is the force that brings them alive, that connects the story within them to the viewers that are enjoying them. Without light, we do not have compelling composition. Without light, we have unclear tone. But through the use of light, we can take any scene, any moment, and create something compelling with it. Far more important than cameras, than even the lenses that capture light, it is the light itself that makes us more or less compelling as storytellers. Today I'll be focusing on three main subjects in regards to light. First, composition. How can we use light to create more compelling compositions? Second is tone. The clarity of our tone is how we create clarity in our storytelling. How does light dictate the tone of our images? And third, I'll take some time to show you how light influences the way that I go through image editing. As we begin with composition, it's important to remember that the goal of composition is to amplify the subject. It's to progress the narrative, to aid in the storytelling. When a viewer looks at an image, we use composition in order to take wherever they find themselves in the frame first and pull them towards what we ultimately want them to focus on. Now, light is an incredible tool for this. It helps us to create depth. It helps us to ultimately add that three-dimensionality and to draw the interest in and towards whatever it is that we want them to focus on. Now, I think the easiest way to show this and to show how light is so essential for composition is to dig into a few images of my own where I used light, perhaps subtly, perhaps heavily, to make my narrative more clear, to make my subject more clear. All right, let's get started. This first image was taken about a week ago in the middle of the Milford Sound on a day cruise. What happened is all these seagulls that are trailing our boat, they were flying by in this dramatic fashion, and I took more photos than I care to admit until I finally got this one with one of the seagulls in the middle of the frame. This lined up well with the two mountains behind it, and that kind of created this story, especially with the wake of the boat creating a bit of a leading line through the foreground. So I had these elements that work, but without the light, I still think the image would have fallen fairly flat. Fortunately, this golden light on the left created a heavy weight inward as it's kind of cascading down straight into the side of those mountains. And then on the right side, we have this intense blue light, which is really just the fading day. It's things coming to a close, it's cold, and the snowy mountains emphasize that theme on the right side. And so with the gold on the left, the blue on the right, we have almost this encapsulation of the subject with light, and that creates a huge amount of strength in the middle of the image. It makes the subjects more compelling, it creates a sense of scale, and quite frankly, I think it just makes it a beautiful image, whereas without the light, it may not have been an image I would have paid any attention to. Now in this next photo, we are in a slot canyon on the west coast of New Zealand, and for the most part, there's no light present except for this one beam of orange light coming through the only available space at the back of the canyon. Now this light serves a few different purposes. First, and most importantly, it adds an immense amount of depth to the image. Where it touches the rock along the left side, it creates a three-dimensionality that helps us to ultimately capture the scene without it being really completely black. Then we have the subject, the person walking through the water on the middle to the right side. What the light does by creating that three-dimensionality is give that sense of adventure and scale for them that they're moving through. It also makes them visible at all. If the cavern were entirely black, this black figure would not be visible at all. And so the light helps us tell this story of entering this mysterious, dark, wet place, but this light that helps guide us through it. This being more of an adventure style photo than a pure landscape photo, but it proves the point quite well that even a little bit of light is so essential to the way that we can tell this story. tone is one of the best tools we have as storytellers, and that's because, in a way, it's innate. The tone is a huge part of how we build our narrative, how we take a scene and create a story in our imagery. And the reason it's innate is directly tied to the way we use light in our images. I'm going to show you two examples to help explain this. In this first example, we're only a couple hours away from sunset, and so we're starting to get the warmth of late day light. And this soft light is pouring over the horizon and coating everything in this slightly orange hue. Now we can play into this color by capturing more of the grass and the foliage and making sure that the atmosphere of the image speaks to that late day light. It's creating a sense of a day coming to a close, not necessarily of warmth, but of comfort. And so we can play into that narrative. And then knowing that we're building that warmth, that narrative of a day coming to a close, we can bring in these mountains in the background. They're jagged, they're blue, they're covered in snow, and so therefore they're quite cold. And this contrast helps us to paint a complete picture of the setting. So in this case, we're using that orange tone. We're working with the light that's coming in as a result of the setting sun, not fighting it, not trying to go against that natural perspective. We're using it to our advantage to create a compelling narrative. Now, in this second example, we have a very cold, chilly scene at the start of a new day. Fog is filling everything, and the frost has only just started to melt off of the ground. We're emphasizing this bluish, greenish hue that's in the air because it helps make the narrative more clear that this is the morning. Everything is very, very quiet. We're still very tired. There's nothing really moving. No birds flying around, no animals running. There's no glow of a sunrise. It's just quiet and chilly. And that's a narrative that we want to tell through this image. So by using that light, by actually shooting towards the light and letting it kind of encompass the scene, we're able to be very compelling with that tonal consistency. So to wrap this up, I think I want to pull up an image here and kind of discuss how I work with light as a part of my editing process. Some of you guys have been asking for an editing video in general, and I will do that at some point, but really it's not much about color in my editing. It's far, far, far more about the use and amplification of light as a means to tell a better story in that image. So what I'm going to do is pull up a partially edited image here and show you how I work with light to ultimately build the narrative within it. Let's hop into Lightroom. All right, so we are in Lightroom now, where I do the vast majority of my editing. Where I want to start is with adjustments done to bring the image a little bit more level, so lifting the shadows and the blacks because it's quite dark, and then just some color adjustments. The tone curves, again, are just lifting my midtones for the most part. In other words, I've done nothing to affect the light. There's no exposure changes, no whites, no clarities, any things like that. And there's no local adjustments either. So where I want to start is just in our basic channel. This is going to be the first thing I do to actually start toying with light and make it more compelling for me. In this case, it's just slightly blown out. So I want to bring the highlights down a little bit. That helps me add a little tiny bit of clarity, maybe minus 15. It's just giving us a little bit more narrative here in the middle and a little bit more detail here where the light is hitting the water. That's something I like to retain if I can. And now something I do on a lot of images. I'm gonna drop the clarity just a little bit. In this case, let's say minus 10. I never wanna go hard, but what this does is bloom our highlights just a little bit. We know that we have this source of light coming in, and it's really gonna be a focal point of our image, partially because it's something that draws the eye, but also because it paints nearly all of the detail in the image. That's where our key light is coming from. So I like giving that a little bit of a bloom so it's not so harsh when your eyes hit it. The next thing I want to do is a local adjustment. And again, this is gonna have to do with a little bit of balancing out the image to emphasize the storytelling that the light is doing for us. First, I will add a radial filter. I call these inverse vignettes. I don't know what the exact term would be. It's just more like a local adjustment. This is just to balance this image out a little bit. I want to bring up the middle so that we have a focus going on in the center. Everything is quite dark, so this helps us retain our interest. The next thing I want to do is add another radial filter specifically on the light itself. So here, what we're doing is emphasizing a little bit more of that bloom effect. The way I like to do this is through dropping the clarity just a little bit further than we had before, maybe another -8, -10, and then also decreasing the dehaze just a slight bit. This gives it a bit of a blooming effect. Let's turn that off and on so I can show you what's going on. Still holding on to the detail I have over there. I'm not losing sight of the rock. I'm not messing with anything too functionally, but I'm giving that light a little bit more of a pleasing effect. Now this is very, very useful. And one thing I might do in this overall image is just to increase the effect that the light is having. I might create a brush, make that just a little bit bigger with a fair amount of feather. And then I am just going to increase the exposure just slightly, the shadows, and then the blacks just slightly. And then paint in a little bit of light. Oh, that's way too much. So let's bring down the black to about 9. Let's bring down the shadow to about 2. Let's give that a try. A little bit more natural there. And I'm just bringing in light where it already was and emphasizing the effect that that light has on the scene. So it's glowing on the edge of this cave. It's bringing out the interior, and it's increasing this light on the floor. It's even catching these plants just slightly. So this is playing with the narrative that the light builds and creating a compelling scene that's told as a result of the light being casted on it. Anyway, that's just a few tools I use. I hope these help you. I will do a full editing video at some point. If there's anything you want me to focus on, let me know based on this video. And otherwise, guys, that's all I had for today. I really appreciate your time and can't wait to see you again soon. Have a good one.